Attention, passengers. This is your co-pilot speaking. Your pilot is black-minded, so you are not going blind and there is no power failure. You are merely experiencing the immense blackness of his proximity, and when you hear his voice, you and the cabin will get even darker than you are currently. We will be cruising at the speed equal to light because the one other thing that travels equally fast is darkness. Your loved ones awaiting your arrival may not recognize you at first sight. This is normal. Simply tell them about the pilot and they will understand. We will taxi to the runway now, so please buckle up and prepare for a high-speed departure. Thank you for choosing Jet Black Airways, where the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. We hope you keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. This one was sponsored and supported by S Jacques again. Shout out to him, and from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind, thank you for coming through on the CashApp and coming through with the news links. I want to point out to you a particular bit of news of which he made me aware. There have been several bits of news coming out of the conflict in Gaza between the people there and the IDF. I'll tell you straight up, I don't think Hezbollah really wants to win a war there. I don't think they want to lose either. I really don't even think that they're the ones that make the decision. I don't think so. And I say that because as you go up and further up in leadership, in any case, you will find that oftentimes there will be some elites that come from political parties or ethnicities, and these elites are not at war with each other. So there will be elites of Iran and elites of Israel that are not at war with each other. There will be things that they don't really want to see. There will be things that both societies don't want, and their elites will be the ones who do the cooperation to make sure that these things neither one wants ever manifest. There's a particular type of leadership that neither one wants for Palestine. In any case, this conflict has been going on for a while, and there's always been arguments in between Iran and Israel, but they've never come to loggerheads before. I have a theory as to why that is, but Muslims would be, to understand why, you're better off going to a Muslim that you know and trust to tell you the truth, if they understand it, and then asking them. If they don't know, then you can at least trust them to tell you the truth that they don't know, and that's fine, because what they don't know, they're not supposed to tell you, and what you don't know is not your fault if you don't really know exactly where to find out. There is something here that really concerns us, and I'll point it out. Senegal chartered a flight and repatriated 117 of its citizens to get out of Lebanon. The thing is that many of the citizens were citizens of both Lebanon and Senegal. See, the Lebanese have a diaspora. The Lebanese are to be found almost more outside of Lebanon than they are in Lebanon. The Lebanese are not really much different from African Americans in that regard. But one thing that they will not do is that they will not allow each other to remain poor. That they don't do. They do not. When they repatriated and they landed in Senegal and the families were able to come and get them in cars and take them to homes that are at least air conditioned. And that's not a bad thing. When the Senegalese that are not also Lebanese landed, and they were repatriated back, that's true, they were leaving jobs as maids. I'm glad that they were, because Lebanon is a war zone, and I don't want our people dying in other people's wars. And I'll tell you that many Lebanese in Lebanon are known for not believing that other people are equal. And this might be something that takes them a few generations living in other places for them to shake off. See, a Lebanese family could migrate to South America, and their son of that first generation might marry a woman from the local population. And they won't necessarily object now. A man from that population trying to marry their daughter needs to be Muslim and he needs to be successful. They probably will object in that case, but they won't object to the son marrying a local, or maybe at least dating and digging out some locals. If you go into Africa, they will generally avoid intermarriage for a very long time, several more generations. And then it will be several generations in which the men can marry local women, but the local men, even if Muslim, cannot marry the Lebanese women. It is not intermarriage or the lack thereof that makes me call somebody biased. It is the directions in which it is allowed and then not allowed. Whichever group allows marriage of their men to someone else and does not allow marriage of their women to men of the same group is a group that does not view others as equal, or at least the other group in question as equal. That is clear cut. As a matter of fact, much of the stereotype of black maids being abused by Arabs comes out of Lebanon. It's not really that easily tolerated in the Gulf. The Gulf is not where families would want to do that in large numbers, certainly not in the country in which I'm living and working. I mean, if she's just going to say that to get something out of them, then that could be bad for her. But if she shows evidence of actually being abused and she gets out, then the family's going to have to do some pretty, they have to going to keep a really tight reign of control to make sure she never reports anything like that. And if guests come over and she shows the guests any evidence, it's over. Once those guests leave, even though they were guests at that house, if they decide to betray and get the news out that she's being ill-treated, it is over for that family. Because the government really only is willing to side just enough to try to avoid prosecuting citizens for a crime they did not commit. If they get evidence like witnesses or bruises or photos or things like that that show that she was actually being abused, then they're going to go after whoever it is that seems to have abused her. They're going to try, was it the husband or the wife? And if it was both, we'll put both of their asses in prison. We're not playing games with them. Not if it can be proven. Now, there are quite a few maids in these Gulf countries that actually do try to steal something and then leave, but they tend to get caught because they can't just escape that easily. They don't realize how organized everything is. So they wind up getting caught, usually with whatever it is that they stole. Then they're put in jail for a little while and deported. Now, that does happen. But most of the stories of abuse are actually coming out of, from what I've been hearing, one source is Kuwait, not so much here, not the countries next to here either. And then another source is largely Lebanon. That's why I hear about this happening. I want y'all to keep that in mind. When the Lebanese were living in Liberia and Liberia broke out, a lot of them they did leave. A lot of them went to Lebanon, and then Lebanon got in the fights too, and it was bad there. And so they went to other places. They went to sometimes they went to places that were very poor, but where the fighting had not broken out, like the Congo. They formed a business community in many of these places. It's not necessarily wrong, but they're not necessarily either trying to fully uplift the local population as well. It's not really what they're trying to do. As a matter of fact, do you know where a lot of scamming began in Nigeria? Many of them got the idea from a practice that was pretty common in Nigeria, in which, and it was probably only a few Lebanese that did this, but they became known for this. And that was that they would offer up a warehouse of inventory as collateral, take out a loan. When they would default on the loan, the warehouse would then be seized by the bank for the inventory that would be inside, and the inventory was gone. And they would have left the country at this point. So many of them were able to get businesses started without having to pay back the loans because they simply ran out of the countries from which the loans were made. And they would just go to another nation. That was where many Nigerians got the idea of scamming from. They said, well, we'll do this to others. I mean, we can't just get out and leave Nigeria on a whim like that. They can, we can't, but we'll, some of us will do this to others because they can do this and get rich quick. Now, where would they get this inventory from? Well, they were backing each other up. One would go and say, listen, let's move your inventory into this warehouse, and then I'll offer that as collateral. I'll get a loan. I'll start my own business. All right, yeah, we'll do that. So it wasn't even their inventory. And when the warehouse was then later on taken, okay, yeah, there was a warehouse and the bank gets the warehouse, but there's just nothing in it. This is what a Nigerian told me long before I even became, well, I should say several months before I even became Muslim. I learned about this about 2001, months before. And I thought, man, this is jacked up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, what I was hearing. But he said, yeah, they did this. He said, yep, that's sort of corruption. He said that before, the issue might have been just bribery, but not extortion or actively trying to use corruption to make money. Rather, it was just accepting bribes that were offered to you. But that later on, it became more cutthroat. And so Lebanon repatriated citizens. And I'm going to say this. I don't think that the people that they repatriated are mostly criminals of any sort. I don't think that's the case. What it is that they will look out for each other. That's one thing. And the other thing, too, is that when they start to go to other places like South America and Africa and the Caribbean, and they set up businesses, we don't turn around and do things to sabotage them from getting too far ahead the way that Arabs tend to do with each other. Oh, they'll sabotage each other if they feel envy or jealousy. They'll do that. Now, they might not do it when they leave Arab lands, but you have to look and see, now, why is it that Lebanon can be in such a bad situation, but the Lebanese go anywhere else and then they tend to thrive? Well, one of the reasons is that they're not sabotaged as much. That's something to take notice of. And this is something that happens with many Arabs in general. A lot of them don't wind up succeeding if they just stay where they're from trying to set up a business, because that's where the enemies are. They better go somewhere where they're neutral and people will judge the business on its own merits. And that oftentimes happens. It's just like with black folks. If you're from Baltimore and you're from a certain neighborhood there and you decide to set up a business in that neighborhood, they hate on you. They start acting like, you know what? You owe it to us to give us your inventory for free. Better off going somewhere where you're neutral. They don't know about you. That's a strange thing, but it's true. So Pacific Islanders face this a lot of times as well. They face this scenario in which if they start a business there on the island where they're from, other locals feel like they just owe it to them to do them a favor, so they may even help themselves to whatever the inventory is without letting them see it. Oh, he owes that to us. It's ours. It's not just his, it's ours. So he gets no profit because he's losing inventory because people are swiping it. They're doing everything but paying for it. They'll get it on credit, not pay it back, swipe it when nobody's looking, anything except walking in and paying the price to get whatever it is that they're selling. God forbid you try to start a livestock supply business in some of these Pacific Islands. If that's where you are from and you're one of the natives of that place, man, just no, you're not going to rise up above us in any way. Keep on importing this livestock and we'll keep stealing it. You're not going to sell it and make money. We're not paying you for that. And we're going to eat your livestock, nigga. And you thought it was only black folks. So many of them have to actually leave and go elsewhere, and they got to go to places where it is that we don't do this to other people. And that's why it is that foreign businesses tend to succeed in the Caribbean and Africa and South America and in these Pacific Islands. Not these specific, but these Pacific Islands. People that are not from there go there and tend to do well because the locals don't feel like these folks owe them anything for free. So they will respect the boundaries of a business and conduct it like a business. And that's how these folks do well. Now, I'm not saying they are just millionaires, but they're not broke and struggling to live day by day. They're not doing that. It's not like that. But now you've got these Lebanese that were repatriating, and this is not the first time that this has happened. There have been Lebanese before that have been in Lebanon. Every time real serious fighting breaks out, there are many of them that have dual citizenships and they get repatriated to the other country of their citizenship. And I'm now at this point going to tell you about one nation in which that won't be the case. At least it was not a long time ago. You know what nation that is? Liberia. The nation that is derided for being too American is actually also one nation in which it at least was in its constitution. I don't know if it still is, but it was in the Constitution that you had to be of black blood to be a citizen. So you could only be a Lebanese Liberian if you were a black Lebanese Liberian, because if you did not have black ancestry, you didn't get citizenship, and that's the end of it. You could own the business, but you could not own land. So many Lebanese men married Liberian women, had Liberian kids that had dual citizenship, and the kids could then inherit both. But one of the reasons they would marry these Liberian women is because they could marry a woman that was allowed to own the land. He would own the business, and then therefore it would consolidate. It would go down to the kids. But they weren't known. I never really asked anybody, well, do they treat their black Liberian Lebanese kids the same as their children from Lebanese mothers? I've never asked anybody. I don't think I have to. I'm sure it went on an individual basis. That's one thing. But I'm not saying that these folks did anything wrong. I'm merely saying that we're going to have to be honest about our relationships to others in general. And without making the worst assumptions all the time, we're going to have to be willing to get to know some of these other folks from these other groups and see exactly how it is that we as a people should relate to them. How should we relate to Lebanese people in general? Get to know some of them, good and bad, find out. I can tell you this, and I don't blame them. When the fighting breaks out in Lebanon, they're going to go somewhere, wherever they're allowed to go and repatriate, they're going to do it. And why shouldn't they? But the question is also going to be, if some of us are citizens of a particular land like that, how are we going to be treated? See, if a Lebanese that is also Senegalese becomes a news reporter in Senegal, I don't know if they ever would, but if they ever did become one, the local Senegalese that are not also Lebanese would not take issue with that and say, well, no, they can't be. They can't become news reporters within Senegal. They can't do that. But when you had a black Lebanese lady that was a news reporter in Lebanon, I think her first name was Dahlia. I can't remember her last name. She became a news reporter, and people began to leave comments underneath some of the videos on the news channel's YouTube channel. And I believe her parents were from Sudan, and she was born there, and I guess that makes her a citizen by birth. I'm not sure. Somehow she was a dual citizen. One of her citizenships was Lebanese. And she had to respond to these comments on a video. And these comments were comments about pedigree and genetics and bad genes being used to represent the people of Lebanon. And she responded and said, look, if you got a problem with my DNA or how I look, you go argue with God. He created us. I'm a news reporter doing my job. What the fuck is your problem? And see, here in this country, you can't just, in the kingdom, you cannot just go online and just start talking bad about a news reporter because they're black. You ain't got to like them. But you mess around and say something like that. Now, if you can't be found, they can't find out exactly who you are that left this particular comment, then they can't find out. If they find out who you are that left this particular comment, well, you're lucky if you get a lawsuit and you lose and have to pay. That's when you're lucky. You can wind up serving some time for that here. There are laws actually here that go against discrimination based on tribe or race. Lebanon, if they have it, does not enforce it. But the Senegalese do stand with the Lebanese and the Palestinians, and I can understand why they would. As I've stated, all of them people surrounding that genocidal mass murdering government are keeping that genocidal mass murdering government from doing the same thing to us. So I understand why there would be a solidarity if we understand that that's what it is, if we understand the practical reasons for it. They don't love us and they're not fighting them on our behalf. They don't hate us either. The ones fighting, I don't mean that particular government, but the ones fighting that particular government don't love us and they're not fighting them on our behalf. They also don't hate us. They're not thinking about us, but they're doing something for us without really realizing that they're doing it. Much like the Muslims who ruled Spain were keeping the original Americans alive for a long time, and they weren't doing it because they even knew they were doing it. They weren't doing it out of love or hatred for the original Americans. They didn't know about them that much. They didn't think about them. Same thing here, except we know that we're benefiting. So I can understand why they would have this, but this does not mean also, even when you do support someone because they're doing something that is in your interest and that's moral, it doesn't mean that you don't start looking at how it is you are going to relate to them and how we as a unified racial bloc are going to relate to them. Not because we all black folks love each other. That's not why, but because we simply understand the need to cooperate to protect ourselves from people that hate us because we're black. Whether those people are really white or Arabs that call themselves white or mestizos that wish they were white or Chinese and Koreans that look up to white as better than them. Or even if these folks are actually some black folk that simply think that white is right and black is wrong. Whoever they are, we just have to realize that it is in our best interest to cooperate with each other to defend ourselves from such folks, because there are still people on the planet who, if they have power, are going to discriminate against you just on the basis of you being black. They're oftentimes stopped. Many governments don't want them to have free reign, even if the governments don't want to be overrun by us. They still don't want such races to have free reign from amongst the population. But if these folks get that power, they become like the rioters in the UK. And it's over for you. Good night. On the basis of you being brown or black, certainly black. Unless they realize that they're going to come up against a cooperative black resistance composed of different parties of black folks who, even if they don't like each other, are going to defend each other from folks who want to oppress us just because we're black. Then we can start discussing whether or not such other folks can be citizens of our nations or not. See, I don't blame Senegal for keeping its word. If they allowed anybody to become a citizen based on being born there, then they allowed anybody. It could have been me and I'm black. It could have been you and you're blacker. It could have been a Lebanese who's not black at all. It could have been. If Senegal's just keeping its promise, then that's great. It's keeping its promise. That's normal for a government to do. But we're going to have to start looking at why it is that we still have to start looking at why it is that Egypt and Morocco can be members of the African Union. Well, Morocco, I think they can't be. But we have to look at why it is that with what's going on in Libya, Libya could be a member nation of the African Union. Egypt could be a member nation of the African Union when they don't even like being that, and then turn around. And Algeria has a good reason to be a member. I can understand that. They're not like, they ain't a bunch of sellouts and weaklings and all. They're fairly revolutionary. Like, they understand concepts like mental colonization, brainwashing, inferiority complex, resistance to these things. They get it, but that's a different story. But like when you start looking at these nations that they shouldn't be, and you start to wonder why the hell can they be, but Haiti can't. Haiti was ready to join the African Union, and the African Union nations voted and said, it's not on the continent. We're not going to accept him. Well, newsflash, Madagascar's not on the continent. It's next to it. Sao Tome and Principe are not on the continent. They're next to it. They're closer than Haiti. That's true. But let's call it for the what it is, man. Cape Verde is not on the continent, but it's close. I don't object to these nations being considered African nations. Mauritius, the Seychelles, I think they should be considered African nations. But if Haiti is clearly a nation of African people that have been forced away from home and now is a majority black nation, they say, listen, we'd like to join, then the AU did not have any business leaving Egypt and Libya in and not taking in Haiti. See, I don't want this thing to go too far. It makes perfect sense where it is right now. To a certain extent, it does, but I don't want this to get too far because we still have this thing in our heads. Whether we're African American, continental African, or Caribbean, we got this thing in our heads where when we set up nations, we are afraid to make them exclusively black. And if we're going to make exceptions for nations that don't do the same thing with their race and exclude us from their citizenship, then that would be one thing because it's give and take. It's quid pro quo. So that's understandable. Okay, fair enough, fine. But what about when a nation says, oh, hell no? What about when a nation says, in order to be a citizen of us, you either must be of a particular racial origin, or you cannot be of a particular racial origin, and then you get citizenship. If a nation does that, another nation does that, and you know that if your country descended into war, you would have no way of being able to repatriate to that particular country, even if you lived there or you were born in that nation, then you say, okay, well, then that means that if you are from that particular nation, you can't get citizenship here and then repatriate to us if your nation descends into war, even if it's a war that we caused. All I'm saying is we got to start being Most of us are trying to actually get on code with treating everybody equal to us. Many of us are trying to do that. And in order to do that, we're going to have to actually at times make friends with individuals from these cultures so that we'll know how to do it. Because then you'll learn the good and the bad. And you won't go too far, nor will you make the mistake of not going far enough either. I'll say that for this reason. I don't know if Dahlia, that reporter in Lebanon, if I got her first name right, could repatriate to Sudan, would she even be in any better situation? I don't know. She may be in a real tough situation. She goes to Sudan, it's bad. She stays in Lebanon, it's bad. But by the same token, if she had been in Sudan at the time that it descended into war and she went and asked to be repatriated to Lebanon as a Lebanese citizen as well, I don't know what would have happened. I'm not sure. Would Lebanon have said, okay, listen, you're getting repatriated? Or would Lebanon have said, yeah, but you're also a Sudanese citizen, you stay there? In word, I don't know. And I have to admit that I don't know. So before I do say that Senegal should do one way or should do one thing or another, this is what I would say. I would ask some of you who are friends with several Lebanese that are honest or who have experience living in Lebanon to tell me, what would they do? If you got a black Senegalese that's also a Lebanese citizen and Senegal, God forbid, were to descend into a war, would they be repatriated or not? Let me know. But we do have to understand that that is the basis for how we make these determinations moving forward. Again, shout out to S Jacques for sending me that link and making me aware of this. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. I hope that this helped out. As always, black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, black heterosexual, non-select male power because they don't like it, black patriarch until extinction of judgment day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice, forever.